The holiday season is a time of joy and celebration, a chance to gather with family and loved ones, to share meals, exchange gifts, and create memories that last a lifetime. Christmas brings with it a sense of magic, of warmth and togetherness, as we reflect on what truly matters most. But sometimes, even in the glow of twinkling lights and holiday cheer, darkness can creep in. For some, Christmas isn't a time of joy. It becomes a moment of tragedy, heartbreak, and even horror. We'll be diving into chilling stories where the season of giving took a sinister turn. Murders, mysteries, and crimes that unfolded during a time meant for peace and love. These are tales that remind us how quickly everything can go horribly wrong, even over the most magical time of the year. When Judy Anderson didn't show up for work on the morning of December 26, 2007, her friend and coworker Linda Thiel immediately felt that something was wrong. Concerned, Linda decided to drive to the Anderson family home in Carnation, Washington to check on her friend. But what she found there was beyond anything she could have imagined. Linda stumbled upon a horrific scene and dialed 911. Here is that call.
911?
There's been a murder. There's 3 people dead that I can see right now.
Inside?
I just came up. She works with me.
Inside the house?
Yes.
What do you see?
There's a baby and a man and a woman, and she's my best friend.
Inside the Anderson home, Linda found the bodies of Scott Anderson, Judy's son, Scott's wife, Erica, and their 2 young children. In the backyard, she discovered Judy and her husband, Wayne, both dead. 6 members of the same family were brutally murdered. But who could have committed such an unspeakable act? And where was Judy's other daughter, Michelle Anderson? Was she another victim, or was she responsible for this massacre? This is the harrowing story of the Anderson family Christmas massacre. Wayne and Judy Anderson were well-loved members of their close-knit community in Carnation, Washington. 60-year-old Wayne was an engineer at Boeing, while his 61-year-old wife, Judy, worked for the United States Postal Service. The couple had been happily married for 31 years and had 3 children, Mary, Scott, and Michelle. Their eldest daughter, Mary, lived in nearby North Bend and maintained a good relationship with her parents. Their son, 32-year-old Scott, was married to 31-year-old Erica Mantle Anderson. Scott worked long hours in construction to support his family, while Erica was a devoted stay-at-home mom to their 2 children, 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan. The family lived about 25 minutes away from Wayne and Judy's home in Black Diamond, Washington. The youngest of Wayne and Judy's children, Michelle Anderson, was 29 years old. She lived with her boyfriend of 5 years, 29-year-old Joseph McEnroe, in a mobile home in Falls City, Washington. The couple had met on an online fantasy fiction chat room and quickly moved in together in 2004. On paper, Michelle and Joseph seemed ordinary. Michelle worked as a night security guard for Nintendo, and Joseph was employed at Target. They paid their rent on time and kept to themselves. But neighbors described them as odd and reclusive, saying they rarely left their home and avoided eye contact with others. One neighbor remarked that even small inconveniences, like a car parked in their space or a cat wandering into their yard, would send Michelle into a fit of rage. Another neighbor noted that Michelle frequently talked about her parents' money and complained about her financial struggles. Michelle often referred to herself as the black sheep of her family. She claimed to have a volatile relationship with her parents, alleging that her father had hit her and that her mother was mean and unsupportive. However, Judy was deeply concerned for her daughter's well-being. She frequently visited Michelle and Joseph at their mobile home, often bringing food and supplies to help them. Neighbors noticed Judy's monthly visits, describing her as a mother who genuinely cared about her daughter despite their strained relationship. Michelle's grievances weren't limited to her parents. She harbored resentment toward her brother Scott, claiming he owed her a significant amount of money, a sum she estimated to be around $40,000. She also expressed jealousy toward Erica, believing that Erica had come between her and Scott, creating a wedge in their once close sibling bond. By 2007, Michelle and Joseph had moved out of their mobile home in Falls City and into a trailer on Wayne and Judy's property. This move only deepened the tension between Michelle and her parents, who had begun pressuring her to pay rent for living on their land. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2007, the Anderson family planned to gather at Wayne and Judy's home to celebrate the holiday. Scott, Erica, and their 2 young children made the drive from Black Diamond to Carnation, looking forward to a festive evening with family. But unknown to them, Michelle and Joseph had sinister plans. At around 4 p.m., Michelle and Joseph entered the Anderson home, armed with a revolver and a handgun. Judy was wrapping Christmas presents in the back of the house when Joseph distracted her. Meanwhile, Michelle approached her father, Wayne, and attempted to shoot him. However, her gun either jammed or missed. Seeing this, Joseph stepped in and shot Wayne in the head, killing him instantly. They then turned their attention to Judy, shooting her 3 times. Once both parents were dead, Michelle and Joseph tried to clean up the blood with towels and rugs before dragging the bodies to a shed behind the house. About an hour later, at 5 p.m., Scott, Erica, and their 2 children arrived at the home, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As soon as they entered the living room, Michelle pulled out her gun and shot Scott multiple times. She and Joseph then turned their weapons on Erica, who was shot 3 times but managed to grab the cordless phone and dial 911.
Hello?
In the frantic 911 call, Erica's voice could be faintly heard before Joseph grabbed the phone, removed the batteries, and smashed it against the wall. Erica pleaded for her life, but Joseph shot her in the head, killing her instantly. The pair then turned their guns on the children. 5-year-old Olivia was shot first. Heartbreakingly, 3-year-old Nathan picked up the phone batteries from the floor and tried to hand them to Joseph. But Joseph, unfazed, shot the young boy as he clung to his mother's chest. At 5:13 p.m., police were dispatched to the Anderson home in response to the suspicious 911 call. But when officers arrived at 5:45 p.m., they found the front gate locked. Unable to access the property, they left without further investigation. Tragically, they had no idea that 6 members of the Anderson family lay dead inside. It wasn't until 2 days later, on December 26th, that the horrific truth was uncovered. Judy's coworker and friend, Linda Thiel, drove to the Anderson home after Judy failed to show up for work. Upon arriving, Linda found the front gate locked, just as police had 2 days earlier. But instead of turning away, Linda walked around the gate to reach the house. She knocked on the front door and called out, "Judy, it's Linda. We're worried about you." When there was no response, Linda tried the door and found it unlocked. Something she knew was unusual, as Judy always kept the house locked. As Linda stepped inside, she was met with a chilling sight. The bodies of Scott, Erica, and their children lay in the living room. Little Nathan was still huddled against his mother's chest, and Olivia's lifeless body was partially beneath her mother. All 4 had been shot in the head. Overwhelmed, Linda quickly called 911. When police arrived, they discovered the additional bodies of Wayne and Judy in the shed behind the house. Each had been shot in the head. Hours later, at around 11 a.m., Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe arrived at the property. Their behavior immediately raised suspicions. Despite the presence of police tape, officers, and a mobile command center, neither Michelle nor Joseph inquired about what had happened or expressed concern for their family. Detectives quickly separated the pair for questioning, sensing they might know more than they were letting on. During initial questioning, Michelle and Joseph claimed that on December 24th, they had decided to drive to Las Vegas to get married. They alleged that they had gotten lost and turned back, surprising Wayne and Judy with their news upon returning to the house. However, when their story was revisited, inconsistencies emerged, and under pressure, Michelle broke down. "What the hell have I done?" she cried. "I'm a monster." Both Michelle and Joseph eventually waived their constitutional rights and gave lengthy confessions to the murders. Michelle admitted that her resentment toward her family had reached a boiling point. She expressed anger at her parents for pressuring her to pay rent for the trailer, frustration with Scott for allegedly owing her $40,000, and deep-seated jealousy toward Erica. Detectives later noted that during her interviews, Michelle mentioned money over 35 times, reinforcing the idea that financial resentment was a major motive. Michelle told detectives that she had been planning the murders for weeks. She chillingly explained, "I was tired of everybody stepping on me. If they weren't going to resolve things by December 24th, then I was going to do it my way." When asked about Erica and the children, Michelle claimed she didn't want the children to grow up with the memory of what happened. Joseph, in his confession, revealed that Michelle told him to kill the children because she couldn't bring herself to do it. He described his role as reluctant, but said he ultimately followed through because she convinced him it was necessary. With their confessions and evidence recovered, including one of the discarded weapons, Michelle and Joseph were charged with 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. The legal proceedings for Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe dragged on for years, costing taxpayers millions of dollars. Initially, King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg announced his intention to seek the death penalty for both defendants. He argued that the magnitude of the crime, the cold-blooded murder of 3 generations of a family, including 2 young children, warranted the harshest punishment. However, the decision to pursue the death penalty faced significant opposition. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee had placed a moratorium on executions, and defense attorneys argued that pursuing death sentences would be both costly and futile. Michelle, who had initially said she wanted to be executed, changed her stance once the possibility of facing the death penalty became real. Joseph McEnroe's trial began in January 2015, more than 7 years after the murders. His defense team painted him as a mentally fragile man who had been manipulated by Michelle. They described him as a victim of her controlling personality, claiming she had molded him into an attack dog. During the trial, jurors heard a taped confession in which Michelle admitted to being the mastermind behind the murders. "It was all my idea," she said. "I pushed him into it."
What did you do to try to stop this, Joe?
I can't even say now. I tried everything that I could.
His attorney asked him why he didn't just leave.
Well, why not just walk out the door and leave?
I couldn't do that.
Joseph displayed outbursts on the stand, even laughing at one point.
McEnroe, McEnroe. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. I did because I thought I had to. And yeah, I know that's not a very good excuse, but I'm not trying to excuse myself. I'm just trying to explain my actions.
Joe, how often do you think about killing the Andersons?
It's in my mind all the time.
Joseph's attorneys emphasized his troubled upbringing, pointing to his abusive mother and unstable childhood as factors that made him susceptible to Michelle's influence. Joseph himself testified that he killed Olivia and Nathan because Michelle told him to, and that he believed it was the only decent thing to do in the moment.
At least nobody suffered. The way that it is, at least nobody suffered.
The prosecution, however, painted Joseph as a willing participant. They argued that his calm demeanor during the murders and his detailed confessions demonstrated that he was fully aware of his actions. Prosecutor Scott O'Toole told the jury, "Joseph McEnroe destroyed 3 generations of a family. He didn't have to pull the trigger, but he did, again and again." After weeks of testimony, the jury found Joseph McEnroe guilty of all 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. However, they were unable to unanimously agree on the death penalty. With an 8-4 split in favor of execution, Joseph was instead sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michelle Anderson's trial began in January 2016, 8 years after the massacre. By this time, the death penalty had been taken off the table following the jury's decision in Joseph's case. Prosecutors instead sought a sentence of life without parole. During her trial, Michelle displayed little emotion. At times, she cried and hung her head, but she refused to address the court or show remorse for her actions. Her defense team described her as deeply troubled, pointing to her history of strained relationships with her family. However, they did not call a single witness to testify on her behalf, citing her lack of cooperation. Prosecutor Scott O'Toole once again took the lead, focusing on Michelle's greed and jealousy as primary motives. He highlighted her repeated mentions of money during her confession and her hatred of Erica, whom she blamed for driving a wedge between her and Scott. This was a massacre born out of pure, unadulterated greed, O'Toole said in his opening statements. Family members of the victims delivered powerful impact statements during the trial. Erica's mother, Pam Mantle, addressed Michelle directly, saying, "When you shot her, she called 911 not just to save herself, but to save her babies. She knew you would kill them too. You are not big and tough, Michelle. You are a bully and a coward." Michelle's older sister, Mary Anderson, also spoke, telling her, "It kills me. I loved you so much. Just know that they loved you too." After weeks of testimony, the jury convicted Michelle Anderson of 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. On April 21, 2016, she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Anderson family Christmas massacre left an indelible mark on the Carnation community and beyond. 6 lives were senselessly taken in what should have been a time of joy and togetherness. Michelle Anderson is currently serving her life sentence at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. Joseph McEnroe is imprisoned at the Washington State Penitentiary. Both will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. For the surviving family members, the loss remains unbearable. Mary Anderson, who lost her parents, brother, sister-in-law, niece, and nephew in a single day, continues to mourn their absence. "You don't ever really heal from something like this," she said in a later interview. "You just learn to carry it." As we remember Wayne, Judy, Scott, Erica, Olivia, and Nathan, we honor their lives and the love they shared. May they rest in peace. A quick interruption. If you like this content, please hit the like button, as it helps me out a lot. I really appreciate it. Now on to our next true, chilling Christmas story. The day after Christmas in 1996, a chill lingered in the air across southern Texas. For one man, the routine drive back to work seemed ordinary at first. He had just finished his lunch break and was heading back to Quinney Electric, an electrical contracting company in Bexar County, just outside San Antonio. But as his truck rolled along the highway, something on the shoulder caught his attention. A bluish-gray minivan, parked at an odd angle, with what looked like a flat tire. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a case of bad luck for whoever owned the vehicle. But as the man got closer, unease crept in. The van was abandoned, and there were no signs of the driver. Where had they gone? Had someone picked them up? He decided to pull over and take a closer look. As he approached the van, recognition struck him like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just any vehicle. It was a 1991 Dodge Caravan belonging to one of his employees, 32-year-old Patty Vaughn. Patty had worked as a receptionist at Quinney Electric for only a couple of months, but she had already left an impression as a dedicated, cheerful worker. She hadn't shown up that morning, which was unusual for her, but given the holiday season, no one had thought much of it. At that moment, the man assumed the best. Maybe Patty had run into car trouble and decided to walk the short 2-mile distance to the office. But when he arrived back at work, Patty wasn't there. As the hours ticked by, it became clear something was terribly wrong. No one had seen or heard from Patty since Christmas Day. Unbeknownst to her boss, he had stumbled across what would become the first clue in one of Texas's most baffling mysteries. Over the next several weeks, her disappearance would unravel into a web of suspicion, community whispers, and heartbreaking dead ends. This is the haunting story of Patty Vaughn, the devoted mother of 3 who vanished on Christmas Day, and whose case remains unsolved to this day. From the outside, Patty Vaughn's life seemed idyllic. A devoted mother of 3, a talented singer, and an active member of her small community in Lavernia, Texas. Those who knew her describe a warm, kind-hearted woman whose faith and passion for music lit up any room she entered. As a devout Christian, Patty poured much of her time and energy into her church. She sang in the choir, performed at church events, and even started her own Christian folk band called Prism. Patty's story began in San Antonio, where in the early 1980s she worked at a local burger joint. It was there that she met J.R. Vaughn, a confident young man with aspirations of starting his own construction business. The two hit it off almost immediately, and by 1985 they were married. Over the years, they built what appeared to be a stable and successful life together. They had 3 children and moved between several states for J.R.'s work before eventually returning to their roots in Lavernia. It was a picturesque setup. J.R.'s construction business provided a steady income, and Patty stayed home to care for the kids. On Sundays, she could be found leading the choir at her United Methodist Church, her voice filling the sanctuary with hopeful melodies. But behind closed doors, Patty's life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. By the mid-1990s, cracks had begun to form in her marriage. Those close to Patty noticed subtle but troubling signs of unhappiness. She confided in family members that J.R. could be controlling. He didn't want her working outside the home, and his comments toward her were often harsh and demeaning. For years, Patty tried to make things work, putting her children's well-being above her own struggles. But by the fall of 1996, she realized that the problems in her marriage were too big to ignore. After 11 years together, Patty and J.R. agreed to a trial separation. J.R. moved into an apartment in San Antonio, while Patty remained in their family home in Lavernia with the children. For Patty, this separation marked a turning point. For the first time in years, she stepped back into the workforce, taking a receptionist position at Quinney Electric. Though the separation wasn't easy, those close to Patty noticed a spark in her that hadn't been there for years. She seemed lighter, more confident, and ready to embrace this new chapter of her life. Adding to her newfound optimism was a surprising reunion. Shortly after the separation began, Patty reconnected with Gary, an old boyfriend from her teenage years. The two had first met in 1982, when Patty was 18 and living with her family. They'd shared a deep connection, but their romance was cut short when Gary's ex-girlfriend revealed she was pregnant. Out of a sense of obligation, Gary had ended things with Patty. Now, over a decade later, both newly single, Patty and Gary found their way back to each other. The rekindled relationship gave Patty hope, and she confided in her family that Gary made her feel like herself again. On Christmas Eve, Patty brought Gary to a family gathering, formally introducing him as her boyfriend. Her relatives were thrilled to see her happy after so many years of struggle. But not everyone approved. Small-town gossip had a way of spreading quickly, and Patty's relationship with Gary became a source of controversy within her church and community. Some members disapproved of her dating while still technically married to J.R. Just weeks earlier, on December 13th, a fellow church member spotted Patty and Gary having lunch at a Dairy Queen and reported her to the church minister. What followed was humiliating. During choir practice, the minister publicly reprimanded Patty, declaring that her behavior was immoral and unbefitting of someone who represented the church. The public shaming hurt, but Patty pressed forward, refusing to let the criticism derail her progress. As Christmas Day approached, Patty had every reason to feel optimistic. Her relationship with Gary was blossoming, her job gave her a newfound sense of independence, and she was surrounded by the love of her family. But the joy of that season would soon turn to heartbreak. For Patty Vaughn, Christmas Day of 1996 should have been a time of celebration, a chance to make lasting memories with her 3 children. Despite her recent separation from J.R., the two had agreed to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the kids. That morning, J.R. joined Patty and the children at their home in Lavernia to open presents and enjoy their usual holiday traditions. At first, everything seemed to go as planned. The family gathered around the tree, unwrapping gifts while the children laughed and played with their new toys. But behind the scenes, tensions were simmering. According to J.R., at some point during the day, the two began to argue. He later claimed that the fight escalated, and Patty stormed out of the house in anger, taking her minivan and driving away. But this version of events quickly raised questions. According to several accounts from Patty's family, something was deeply off that day. They noted that Patty had spent most of Christmas locked in her bedroom, a behavior completely out of character for her. Patty adored her children and always made holidays special for them. The idea that she would isolate herself during such an important day felt wrong. Family members who stopped by the house that day also reported something strange. When they asked to see Patty, JR allegedly told them she wasn't feeling well and refused to let them into her room. While it's unclear whether these visitors were from JR's family or Patty's, the claim appears in multiple sources and has never been fully explained. Later that afternoon, JR called his sister Marilyn and asked her to take the children to their younger sister's home. This change of plans left only Patty and JR in the house together. What happened next remains a mystery. JR claimed that after their argument, Patty drove off in her minivan, leaving him alone. But by the following evening, no one had seen or heard from her, and the alarm bells began to ring. At around 1:30 p.m. on December 26th, Patty's boss at Quinney Electric discovered her minivan abandoned on Loop 1604, a highway that encircles the outskirts of San Antonio. The vehicle was about 15 miles from Patty's home and just 2 miles from her office. The van appeared to have a flat tire, but Patty was nowhere to be found. When JR was informed about the discovery, his response raised eyebrows. According to Patty's family, JR claimed he wasn't concerned because he assumed Patty had gone to see Gary, her new boyfriend. But when Kathy, one of Patty's cousins, called Gary, she learned that this wasn't true. Gary hadn't seen Patty at all on Christmas Day. The last time they'd spoken was the previous night at the family Christmas Eve gathering. Gary was just as confused and alarmed as the rest of Patty's family. Now deeply concerned, Kathy contacted the Bexar County Sheriff's Office to report Patty missing. But to her frustration, the authorities brushed off her concerns. They explained that it was too soon to file a missing persons report. Patty was an adult, and without evidence of foul play, there was no immediate reason to investigate. Unwilling to sit back and wait, Patty's family sprang into action. That evening, Kathy drove to the spot where the van had been found, armed with a flashlight to search the area herself. Meanwhile, Jean, Patty's aunt, began calling other relatives to see if anyone had heard from her. Jean eventually reached Patty's sister Jeannie, who lived in Georgia. Jeannie had a chilling revelation. She told Jean that she had spoken to Patty on Christmas morning, just hours before her disappearance. When Jeannie called, JR answered the phone and then handed it to Patty. Patty's voice sounded strained, and she told Jeannie she had a cold. But Jeannie wasn't convinced. She could tell Patty had been crying. When Jeannie asked what was wrong, Patty admitted she and JR had been arguing, but reassured her sister that it was nothing out of the ordinary. This phone call provided a crucial piece of the puzzle. It confirmed that Patty had been at home on Christmas morning and suggested that her argument with JR was far more intense than he had let on. As the hours turned into days, the mystery deepened. On December 27th, 2 of Patty's cousins, Kathy and Barb, went to her workplace to examine the recovered minivan. What they found sent chills down their spines. Although the van appeared to have a flat tire, they couldn't find a puncture mark. Instead, it looked as though the air had been deliberately let out. Inside, the van was suspiciously clean. Far too clean for a vehicle regularly used to transport 3 young children. The carpets and seats were damp, as if they had just been scrubbed with detergent. Then came the most unsettling discovery of all. Amid the spotless interior, a pile of men's clothing was found. Among the items was a red workman's jumpsuit with the initials JM stitched onto it. To this day, no one knows who the jumpsuit belonged to or why it was in Patty's van. Alarmed by these findings, Patty's family once again contacted the police. This time, with clear signs of suspicious activity, authorities agreed to open a formal investigation. With a formal investigation finally underway, the search for Patty Vaughn gained momentum. News of her disappearance spread quickly through Lavernia and beyond, galvanizing more than 500 volunteers to join search efforts. For days, family members, neighbors, and concerned locals combed through fields, woods, and rural backroads near where Patty's minivan had been found. Search teams even brought in canine units to assist, focusing on areas of interest identified by investigators. One such area was a small, secluded pond about 50 feet wide and 3 feet deep, hidden just off the highway. It was dragged for evidence, but nothing was found. The same result was repeated at every other location the search teams explored. Patty's disappearance seemed to have left no physical trace. Amid the growing uncertainty, Patty's estranged husband, J.R. Vaughn, quickly became a focal point of suspicion, not only for what he did in the wake of Patty's disappearance, but also for what he didn't do. While Patty's family and the community poured their time and energy into finding her, J.R. was conspicuously absent from the search efforts. According to Patty's relatives, J.R. offered two explanations for his lack of involvement. First, he claimed he needed to stay home to care for the children. Second, he said a police officer had advised him not to participate in the search, supposedly to avoid contaminating any potential evidence with his DNA. While these explanations might seem plausible at first glance, Patty's family wasn't convinced. They pointed to several instances of J.R.'s behavior that didn't align with someone desperate to find his missing wife. For example, J.R. claimed he had distributed missing person flyers about Patty, but when family members checked, they discovered a stack of those flyers still sitting untouched in the family home. Then there was the issue of Patty's van. When Patty's boss called J.R. to inform him that the vehicle had been found on December 26th, J.R. initially said he couldn't come to the scene because he was busy filing divorce papers. At that point, Patty had been missing for less than 24 hours. To her family, this seemed shockingly callous. Why would he prioritize filing for divorce over finding his wife? J.R. did eventually go to the site where the van was found, bringing along a spare set of keys so it could be moved to the Quinney Electric office. But even this act raised eyebrows. Instead of expressing concern or joining the growing search efforts, J.R. reportedly carried on with his plans to finalize the divorce paperwork. Perhaps most troubling of all was what J.R. did immediately after Patty's disappearance. By December 26th, he had already moved back into the family home, effectively reestablishing himself there. Just 2 days later, he erased Patty's outgoing message from the home's answering machine and replaced it with his own voice, as if to assert control over the household. One discovery added an eerie layer of suspicion. A letter J.R. had sent to his landlord dated December 23, 2 days before Patty went missing. In the letter, J.R. informed the landlord that he was terminating the lease on his apartment. To Patty's family, this was a clear indication that J.R. had been planning to return to the house permanently, even before Patty vanished. When confronted by police, J.R. claimed that his actions were simply part of a plan to win Patty back. According to his version of events, the argument on Christmas Day had started because he disapproved of her relationship with Gary. J.R. admitted to threatening Patty during the fight, telling her that he could take the house and possibly even the children away from her if he wanted. He said his decision to move back into the house and file for divorce was an attempt to pressure her into reconciling. These explanations, however, did little to satisfy investigators or Patty's family. The pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit. Several days after Patty's disappearance, investigators conducted a forensic search of the Vaughn family home. What they found only deepened the mystery. Much like Patty's minivan, the house showed signs of having been meticulously cleaned. But when luminol tests were conducted, investigators detected traces of blood in multiple locations, including the master bedroom, the adjoining bathroom, and even inside a closet. A mop and bucket found in the garage also tested positive for the presence of blood. Samples were collected and sent for analysis. Months later, in April 1997, the results confirmed what investigators feared. The blood found in the home and in Patty's van was a match to Patty Vaughn. To Patty's family, this was undeniable proof that something terrible had happened to her, likely at the hands of J.R. But police faced a significant obstacle. Without Patty's body, they couldn't definitively prove that a crime had occurred. The amount of blood found in both the house and the van wasn't enough to conclusively show that Patty had been fatally harmed. Adding to the challenges were procedural missteps and jurisdictional issues that hampered the investigation. Because Patty lived in Wilson County but her van was found in Bexar County, there were disagreements over which jurisdiction should lead the case. Meanwhile, the Vaughn home was never formally secured as a crime scene. By the time police conducted their search, JR and his sister Marilyn had already been living there for days, potentially compromising vital evidence. During the forensic search, Marilyn was reportedly present and disruptive, repeatedly questioning investigators and at one point causing them to leave and return on a different day to finish their work. Shortly after this incident, JR stopped cooperating with law enforcement altogether, hiring an attorney and cutting off all communication. By the spring of 1997, several months had passed since Patty Vaughn's disappearance, and the investigation remained painfully stalled. The blood evidence from both the family home and her minivan, while troubling, wasn't enough to bring charges against anyone. Without a body, Texas law posed a significant barrier to prosecution. As investigators would later state, the prevailing mantra was clear: no body, no crime. Still, police worked to follow every lead they could. One of the more intriguing tips came from JR's own professional life. Around the time of Patty's disappearance, JR's construction company had been contracted to work on 2 elementary schools in the San Antonio area. He was personally involved in pouring concrete at both sites. This detail raised alarm bells for investigators. Could JR have used one of these sites to conceal evidence? Or worse, Patty's remains? In May 1997, a team of investigators brought ground-penetrating radar to one of the schools in Pleasanton, Texas. They identified several anomalies beneath the concrete and drilled holes to investigate further. Cadaver dogs were brought in to sniff the openings, but the results were inconclusive. To Patty's family, these searches only deepened their suspicions. They believed the anomalies warranted further excavation, but officials were reluctant to destroy a newly constructed building without more definitive evidence. Over time, these leads faded into the background, with no additional searches conducted at the sites until years later, and even then, they were cursory at best. While police searched for physical evidence, they also tried to untangle the strange web of potential suspects. JR remained at the center of the investigation, but questions lingered about whether he acted alone. In 2008, investigators publicly speculated that 3 or more individuals might have been involved in Patty's disappearance. This theory stemmed from the apparent precision and planning required to stage the crime scene, clean the evidence, and maintain a tight narrative. But despite this suspicion, police stopped short of identifying any additional suspects by name. One clue that has baffled investigators and the public alike is the red work jumpsuit with the initials JM found in Patty's van. To this day, no one has confirmed who the jumpsuit belonged to or why it was there. Theories have ranged from the item being a piece of planted evidence to it belonging to an accomplice who helped cover up the crime. Adding to the confusion was a mysterious tip from an anonymous caller, who claimed a friend had seen Patty's van on the evening of Christmas Day. According to the tip, the friend spotted a white male exiting the van and running away, only to turn back as if retrieving something. This sighting allegedly occurred in the same location where the van was later found, but police were unable to corroborate the claim. And then there was the discovery of new DNA evidence in 2012, which threw yet another wrench into the investigation. Police announced that DNA from another woman, one who was not Patty Vaughn, had been found inside the minivan. While they believed they knew who the DNA belonged to, they didn't have enough probable cause to obtain a sample from the individual for confirmation. To Patty's family, this revelation raised more questions than answers. Could this mysterious woman have been an accomplice? And if so, what role did she play? Some speculated that the DNA might belong to JR's sister Marilyn, who was present at the Vaughn home during critical moments of the investigation. Marilyn's disruptive behavior during the forensic searches and her close proximity to JR throughout the ordeal made her a figure of interest in the public's eyes. But these were just theories, and without hard evidence, the case remained mired in uncertainty. For Patty Vaughn's family, the years following her disappearance have been marked by grief, frustration, and an unrelenting determination to uncover the truth. Her cousins, Kathy and Barb, have been particularly vocal, organizing search efforts, distributing flyers, and keeping her story alive in the public eye. But the road has been far from easy. In 2005, JR had Patty legally declared dead and attempted to collect her life insurance money. Her family responded by filing a wrongful death lawsuit against him, but the case ended in a frustrating compromise. While the court ruled that the insurance money would be held in trust for Patty's children, all claims against JR were denied. Adding insult to injury, JR eventually left Texas with his children, cutting off all contact with Patty's family. He even changed his name, making it nearly impossible for them to maintain a connection with Patty's kids. Over the years, Patty's loved ones have explored every possible avenue to bring her case to resolution. In 2014, police conducted yet another dig at the Vaughn family's former Lavernia home, hoping to uncover new evidence. But, like the searches before it, this effort yielded nothing. As of today, Patty Vaughn's disappearance remains an open case. Despite the passage of nearly 3 decades, her family refuses to give up. For them, the question is no longer just about justice, it's about closure. The story of Patty Vaughn is one of heartbreak and unanswered questions. How could a mother of 3, a woman deeply loved by her family and friends, vanish without a trace on Christmas Day? And why, after so many years, does justice still feel out of reach? With each passing year, the window of opportunity for solving the case seems to narrow. Key witnesses grow older, memories fade, and crucial evidence risks being lost forever. But for Patty's family, the fight is far from over. They hold on to the hope that one day, the truth will finally come to light. As we approach the anniversary of her disappearance, let Patty Vaughn's story serve as a reminder that every missing person deserves to be found, and every family deserves answers. When 8-year-old Katrina opened the door of her grandparents' home in Covina, California, on Christmas Eve 2008, she was thrilled to see Santa Claus standing on the doorstep. The house was alive with holiday cheer, filled with twinkling lights, laughter, and the warmth of family. Presents spilled out from beneath the tree as aunts, uncles, cousins, and siblings gathered for the Ortega family's annual Christmas celebration. Santa's arrival seemed like the perfect end to a magical evening. But as Katrina greeted him, the man in the Santa suit reached for something hidden inside his gift. Instead of a present, he pulled out a handgun and shot Katrina in the face. In a matter of seconds, the joy of Christmas turned into a nightmarish massacre. The man in the Santa suit was not a bearer of gifts, but of death. This is the story of Bruce Jeffrey Pardo and the horrifying tragedy that unfolded on Christmas Eve. Bruce Jeffrey Pardo was born in 1963 and spent most of his life in California. As a young man, Bruce excelled academically, earning a degree in engineering from California State University. His career took off when he landed a lucrative job as an electrical engineer at ITT Electronic Systems, a contractor for the U.S. military. With a 6-figure income, Bruce purchased a home in San Fernando Valley, drove luxury cars, and appeared to have it all. He was outgoing and loved being the center of attention, even volunteering as an usher at his local Catholic church where he kept a watchful eye over children's services. In 2004, Bruce met Sylvia Ortega through a family member. Sylvia, a dedicated single mother of 3, was drawn to Bruce's charm and apparent stability. After 2 years of dating, the couple married, and Bruce seemed to embrace the family life Sylvia had always dreamed of. But behind the polished facade, cracks were already forming in their relationship. Although Bruce had presented himself as a loving and dependable partner, once the couple married, his true nature emerged. He refused to share finances, insisting Sylvia cover all expenses related to her children. Despite earning significantly more, Bruce controlled the couple's shared savings account, contributing little to the family while splurging on luxury items for himself. Sylvia's suspicions about Bruce deepened when she discovered he had fathered a child years earlier, a fact he had deliberately kept hidden. Years before meeting Sylvia, Bruce had been in a relationship with a woman named Elena and fathered a son named Matthew. One day, while under Bruce's care, 13-year-old Matthew wandered outside and fell into the swimming pool. Bruce, distracted by television, failed to notice. Though Matthew survived, the lack of oxygen caused permanent brain damage, leaving him paraplegic and in need of lifelong care. Instead of supporting Elena and his son, Bruce abandoned them, refusing to pay for medical expenses or child support. He even used his disabled son's condition to fraudulently claim a tax deduction. Sylvia was horrified when she learned the truth. Soon after, she moved into a separate bedroom and began planning to leave Bruce. Their marriage officially ended in March 2008, and Sylvia filed for divorce. Bruce's response was cold and vindictive. When Sylvia asked to stay in the family home temporarily to give her children stability, Bruce agreed, only to throw her belongings out and change the locks while she was away. The divorce turned ugly. Sylvia requested monthly alimony and her share of the couple's savings, but Bruce fought back, draining the savings account and claiming financial hardship. Though Bruce's alimony payments were eventually suspended, he viewed the court's rulings as deeply unjust. Fueled by anger and a twisted sense of vengeance, Bruce began meticulously planning his revenge. Between June and November 2008, Bruce legally purchased 5 semi-automatic handguns. He also assembled high-capacity magazines, far exceeding California's legal limits, and used his engineering expertise to convert a rolling air compressor into a homemade flamethrower. In September, he visited a tailor to commission a custom Santa suit, perfectly fitted to his measurements. The suit would not only disguise his identity, but serve as a macabre symbol of his vengeance. By December, Bruce's plan was complete. He had one final court appearance to finalize the divorce, a mere formality. But Bruce had no intention of letting Sylvia or her family celebrate Christmas that year. On December 24, 2008, Sylvia's parents, Joseph and Alicia Ortega, hosted their annual Christmas Eve gathering at their home in Covina, California. The Ortega family was large and close-knit, with 5 adult children and numerous grandchildren. 30 people filled the house that evening, enjoying food, music, and laughter. At 11:30 p.m., the celebration was interrupted by a knock on the door. 8-year-old Katrina ran to answer it, delighted to see Santa Claus standing outside with a gift in hand. But when she opened the door, Bruce pulled out a handgun and shot her in the face, twice. Chaos erupted as Bruce pushed his way inside, firing indiscriminately at the stunned family. Adults and children ran in every direction. Some were shot point blank, while others were caught in the crossfire as they tried to shield their loved ones. In a desperate attempt to escape, one person jumped from a second-story window, while another shattered a glass door. Despite their efforts, 9 members of the Ortega family were killed. But Bruce wasn't finished. He retrieved his homemade flamethrower from a trolley and doused the house with racing fuel. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing the home in a massive inferno. By the time firefighters arrived, the blaze was so intense that it took more than 2 hours to control. Inside the charred remains of the Ortega home, investigators found 9 victims, their bodies burned beyond recognition. DNA testing was required to confirm their identities. Among the dead were Sylvia Ortega, her parents Joseph and Alicia, her siblings Charles, James Jr., and Alicia's son Michael, as well as Charles's wife Sherry and James Jr.'s wife Teresa. Some had died from gunshot wounds, while others succumbed to the flames. Remarkably, Katrina survived her injuries but was left with life-altering trauma. Despite being shot twice in the face, she managed to escape, later enduring multiple surgeries to rebuild her facial structure. Her survival was nothing short of miraculous. 13 children were orphaned as a result of the massacre. 2 others lost one parent. The Ortega family's close-knit bonds were shattered in an instant, leaving survivors to grapple with unimaginable grief. For Leticia Ortega, Sylvia's sister, the tragedy meant losing her parents, siblings, and other relatives in a single night. She later described the experience as living through a nightmare she could never wake from. Bruce's escape plan unraveled almost immediately. As the fire spread, the flames ignited his Santa suit, melting the synthetic fabric onto his skin and causing severe burns. Injured but undeterred, Bruce fled in a rented Dodge Caliber, peeling off what remained of his costume and changing into street clothes. He drove 30 miles to his brother Brad's house in Sylmar, intending to carry out the next phase of his plan. But Bruce's injuries proved too severe. Unable to continue, he lay on his brother's couch and took his own life with a single gunshot to the head. When police arrived, they found Bruce's body surrounded by evidence of his crimes: handguns, cash, and a one-way plane ticket to Canada, a likely decoy meant to mislead investigators. Outside, the Dodge Caliber was rigged with a pipe bomb and ammunition designed to detonate if tampered with. The Los Angeles bomb squad successfully neutralized the threat, preventing further casualties. The Covina massacre left a community reeling. Survivors struggled to rebuild their lives in the shadow of unimaginable loss. Leticia Ortega, Sylvia's sister and the only surviving child of Joseph and Alicia, faced the overwhelming task of caring for her orphaned nieces and nephews. Meanwhile, Katrina, who had survived being shot in the face, became a vocal advocate for gun control. She channeled her pain into activism, speaking out about the need for stricter firearm regulations to prevent similar tragedies. Investigations revealed that Bruce's narcissistic tendencies and obsessive need for control had driven him to commit the atrocity. Despite his outward success, he had spent decades manipulating and abandoning those closest to him. His actions on Christmas Eve were the culmination of years of resentment and entitlement. The massacre also cast a dark shadow over the holiday season. Parents in the neighborhood struggled to reassure their children that Santa Claus was not a monster, but rather a bad man pretending to be Santa. Families were forced to confront the loss of innocence in their children, who now associated a figure of joy and generosity with terror and tragedy. In the wake of the massacre, mental health counselors and trauma specialists were dispatched to Covina to support grieving families and traumatized neighbors. The Christmas Eve tragedy remained a stark reminder of how violence can strike at the heart of cherished traditions. Katrina's survival became a beacon of hope amid the darkness. Her resilience and advocacy for gun control inspired others to fight for change, ensuring her family's story was never forgotten. Leticia Ortega, burdened with the loss of nearly her entire family, found strength in raising her nieces and nephews and keeping the memories of her parents, siblings, and relatives alive. Bruce Pardo's calculated and heartless actions forever changed the lives of those who survived and the community at large. But the strength of the Ortega family and the resilience of those who survived proved that even in the face of unspeakable evil, love and hope can endure. Thank you for joining me for a true chilling murder and mystery at Christmas. While we've explored some of the darker stories of the holiday season, let's not forget the true spirit of Christmas, bringing joy, love, and warmth to those around us. Take this time to check in on your loved ones, hold them close, and tell them how much they mean to you. Be kind, be safe, and create happy memories that will last a lifetime. Wishing you and your family a Merry Christmas, filled with love, laughter, and peace. Until next time, take care and have a wonderful holiday season.